This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, June 8th, 2023. And I have the awesome, the one and only Olivier Blanchard here with me. And we're going to talk about Apple, and some news as well. Hi, Olivier. How are you?
I'm wonderful, and it's so nice to hear my name pronounced the way it was intended to be, for once. Yeah.
Well, you know, we should just do the podcast in French.
On pourrait, oui.
Ah, d'accord.
Ouais.
No, I think the audience is going to be mad at me. I've thought about doing the podcast in two languages, actually, but it's double the work, and I just don't have the bandwidth. Sorry, French people.
I hear you. The thing is, I don't know half of the vocabulary that I need to know in French that I know in English for tech, because I started learning it after I started learning English, and so it's kind of this weird thing where I look for the right terminology when I have to address like French audiences, and it's always a little tricky.
You know, I'm exactly in the same boat. I've lived in North America since I was like 17, 18. You know, it's like 40 years almost or something. And it's like, I don't know. Half the time I'm like, whatever word I'm going to come up with is going to be against the rules of the Académie Française.
Right.
And you're going to be mad at me, right? Yeah, right. So Apple, what, like overarching, what are your thoughts?
Wow. Well, that's the broadest question I've ever been asked.
No, like if you had to funnel it from like a big top funnel down to like the most specific things you're going to talk about. Yeah. What is the thing that what's the theme? Give me one word.
You know, let me turn this on myself for a second and just kind of be a narcissist for 30 seconds. I haven't been excited about Apple for many years. I've been frustrated with where Apple was headed. It went from being the super innovative, super cool company to being extremely successful, but also, in my view, kind of iterative. Sort of like the safe progression of let's try something, let's get a little bit better every year, but without really pushing any boundaries. And this year, this week is the first time that I remember in a very long time thinking, wow, I need to get back into the Apple ecosystem. Like, I'm actually excited about this. So that's kind of the perspective that I go into this with. That it feels like Apple is back after many years of wandering in the desert looking for itself. I think it's found its way again. So without even talking about AR, VR, just in general. And I think one of the underlying themes here, and one that probably doesn't get as much press as it should, is Apple Silicon. And how Apple Silicon is enabling Apple to become the company that it wanted to be all these years, but kind of couldn't.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that for me, there's another theme here. It's the acquisition of Next Computers.
Yeah.
Back in the day, which has created the foundation for what was OS X and is now Mac OS and all the derivatives, because a lot of people don't realize that. I actually had a conversation with my media colleagues on Telegram recently about this. Half of them had no idea that at the core, this is Unix, and at the core, it's the same Unix, Darwin-based kernel, that powers everything: the iPhone, the iPad, the watch, the TV, the headset now, the VR, AR, the Vision Pro, and the Mac, of course. And that also enables with Apple Silicon this really vertically integrated ecosystem that you just talked about. For me, the challenge is that I have one foot in the ecosystem and one foot outside. You know, literally, like, I'm a Mac user. I'm a hardcore, heavy, long-time Mac user. I love it. I love the platform. I love the products they announced this week. But I'm not an iPhone user. Like, I appreciate the iPhone. It's phenomenal. I have one. I don't update it every year. I update every 2-3 years, but it's not my go-to phone. I appreciate what they're trying to do, but every time I try to use it, I feel claustrophobic. The ecosystem of Apple makes me feel claustrophobic because it feels like the more I invest myself emotionally into this ecosystem, and not just financially and technologically by buying the devices, but the more I say I'm going to use iMessage, I'm going to use this continuity feature, the more I'm effing myself over to never use Android or Windows or Linux or whatever might be the new platform ever again. And it pisses me right off as a universal cross-platform adopter. I will be perfectly fine using a Windows PC if I have to tomorrow to do this podcast. However, I don't want to be locked in. So if you look at my Mac, I don't use any of Apple's ecosystem. I use my Mac like a Chromebook essentially, but I do have some Apple ecosystem things, like I use Final Cut Pro and iMovie. Those are very specific to Mac because I think they're great. I use, some Audacity plugins that are only Mac, but it's because, I had to at some point make a decision. There are better plugins for Audacity on the Mac. And it's weird because Audacity is an open source audio editor. And you'd think that all the plugins would be universal, but again, because the foundation, and this is important, I think, for the headset, the foundation of macOS is extremely multimedia and real-time heavy. There's all these built-in audio and video filters that are OS, like baked in, that these plugins I have enable me to use in Audacity that are gone if I go to a PC, for example.
Yeah.
Right? And even now, we talked about the Yoga Book 9i last week with Michael Fisher on my show, and I love that thing. But last night, I downloaded some FLAC files. I installed VLC. I started playing those FLAC files, and the thing would stutter. Yeah. And I'm like, how is it that it's 2023? Windows 11 is awesome. This laptop is amazing. It has plenty of horsepower to run everyday tasks. And I'm running a web browser and VLC, and it's choking on FLAC files. We're not talking video. We're talking high quality audio files. Like, I couldn't wrap my head around it. And I'm sure there's some settings somewhere I need to tweak. And it's not like, I don't think it's epidemic of the system. It's just, I think having this, silicon and the software, especially the software where multimedia has always had precedence in the whole architecture, really makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. And I mean, you see Google trying to take that in that direction, or at least, dipping their toe in there. They're not really creating their own proprietary silicon, not really. But I think these players, especially the mobile first players, understand that although Qualcomm Snapdragon is super good, it can be restricting if you want to build your own stuff. If you don't want to just implement features that somebody else created and allows you to implement for yourself. And so Apple's gamble with silicon, with its own proprietary silicon, was a necessary one. I think it was super high risk. But the thing that I keep going back to is I was skeptical at first, and I thought it would take a lot longer. And what it made, because silicon's hard, it's super hard, and for Apple, regardless of its resources, regardless of the talent that it can acquire and apply to this, for Apple to have gone as far as it has, as quickly as it has with its silicon and its integration is it exceeds my expectations. I thought it would take a couple more years for them to get to where they are now. And so I've been wrong. I admit it. I was a little bit wrong. It happens sometimes, rarely, but it happens.
See, that's interesting to me because I knew right away. See, I even knew when they launched a MacBook 12-inch. Remember that tiny little super thin, super light, fanless Intel? I'm like, I bought one. It was slower. I adapted my use case by limiting my tabs, just like an affordable Chromebook, but it was beautiful hardware. But I could still use, heavy video editing and photo editing apps, at least up to a point. So to me, it was a little more universal than a Chromebook. But I knew then, I'm like, they are going to have to go ARM. There's no other way. There's no way Intel will ever break that nut.
That's right.
Unless they go ARM themselves, which I think they should. I think instead of just manufacturing ARM chips for others, Intel should create their own RISC-V or ARM-based silicon and push it out there to compete with Qualcomm and MediaTek and Apple. And the fact that they're not doing that means they're chicken, because I'm sure they have the engineering expertise to do it. It's also dogma. It's also religion, right?
Yeah.
It's like x86 above all. But look, when I saw that MacBook 12-inch, I was like, when this comes out with ARM, it'll be game over. It'll be a game changer. And I was right. I mean, it didn't come out as a MacBook. It came out as a MacBook Air. But man, even the M1 today is solid and still, in my opinion, blows away a lot of the equivalent PC, And that's why I've been such an enthusiastic Mac user, because I know with a system like Unix at the core, you can go to any chip. You can go to anything, right? So it's a lot harder for Windows to run on ARM because it was never designed. It was so tightly coupled with x86 for so long. Anyway, we're diverging. This is going to be an extra little bit for the Patreons. I love it. Let's dive into the products that were announced, because I want, with this preface to hear your take. I feel like with Silicon and OS, being so well baked now and so tightly integrated, even if the ecosystem's a little scary, because as I said, I feel it's so sucked in every time, and I try not to be because I want choices. I think this headset really benefits from this ecosystem and really shows what you can do, when you have that triad or that trifecta or whatever, right?
Yeah. So I guess we should talk about the Vision Pro, because that's what everybody wants to hear about, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
So, here's my biggest takeaway. And I haven't had, really nobody's had a real true hands-on experience with it, because it's not in production yet. So, even the models that they were showing were sort of like limited demos. But the first thing for me is that being a tech analyst, not just a tech evangelist, I'm in a lot of meetings with a lot of companies that talk about VR, AR, and I have been for many years. And year after year after year, we were told, yeah, this is the year that Apple's going to release its magic glasses, and it never happened. It never happened. It never happens. I don't think demands for AR and VR is particularly greater this year than it was last year. It's been pretty flat, really, for the last few years. AI has sort of sucked all the oxygen out of the room, or generative AI anyway. And so I was also skeptical that Apple was going to release its or at least announce its VR AR product, its goggles, this year, because it's not really it doesn't seem like it's the year for it, right? It's the year of generative AI, not necessarily the year of this. And mobile shipments have been kind of, slow this year. There's not a lot of spend in tech. It seemed an odd time for Apple to release a product that nobody's asking for, at a time when there's a tech slump and potentially some economic turmoil lingering into next year. So kudos to them for taking that chance and doing it anyway. But the thing that I keep going back to is all the conversations I've had with tech companies on the silicon side and on the hardware side about AR and VR. And the sense that I've been getting for the last 2 years is everybody was waiting to see what Apple was going to do. Not necessarily because Apple would be the most innovative in the category, but because Apple is the market maker. Apple traditionally waits for a category to sort of mature and pick up speed. Then they enter the market, redirect it, refine or define it for themselves, and then everybody sort of follows. And then you start getting scale, and the category starts making real money. This didn't seem like the year for that. But the market really did need Apple to at least show us something, show us like, yes, this is where we think this is going. And my questions were, is this going to be more AR or VR, right? My other question was, is this going to be more mobile first or more PC first, right? Is it 5G or is it Wi-Fi?
Right.
Those are the questions that I was having, understanding that Apple is uniquely positioned in the market because it has its own proprietary stack. It's in mobile. It has the PCs. It has the watch. It has everything, essentially. Microsoft doesn't have a phone. Microsoft is, enterprise and client. Google has mobile through Android and its Pixel line, but it's not really with Chrome that big of a player in the PC market. So you have this weird sort of mix where Apple's potential competitors are they're fragmented. right? They're in the enterprise. Meta, of course, with VR is sort of like its own thing. Nobody has the full solution. Nobody has the full
Yeah,
complete
it's
ecosystem.
Apple versus the world, like
Right.
essentially.
Yeah.
You add Microsoft to Facebook to Google
Right.
to Amazon, and you get Apple in
Right,
terms
right.
of like the breadth, right? Like no tablets on Google that are really viable. In my opinion, even though some products are good, like OnePlus Pad, but you're right. It's exactly that.
Right. And so I was really curious to see where Apple was going to take it. And apparently, they went down the middle. They just created their entirely a new OS that, for the time being at least, seems to be more focused on indoor use cases than outdoor use cases. So it's actually more of a
Right.
VR product, really, that looks like an AR product than a true AR product like AR glasses that you would take outside, that would be tethered to your phone, that you would drive and shop with outdoors.
But don't you think that's a result of the realities of what we can do with the hardware? Even Apple can't get past the fact that a lot of the technology that we see in Vision Pro today needs to evolve into something like a pair of glasses.
Yeah. And that's why, in a way, I was really skeptical of all the kind of like insider info rumors, right, around like, Apple releasing its magic glasses this year, next year, whatever, every year for the last 5 years. And every time that there was any kind of rendering, they looked like AR glasses. They never really looked like goggles until the actual prototype design was leaked, and they just looked like ski goggles. And that design didn't match what people were saying about what the product would do, right? There was like this weird disconnect. They definitely looked like VR glasses. And so I think, when we finally got to see it this week, I wouldn't go as far as to say that I got chills, but again, first time in a really long time that I was genuinely excited and pleased and pleasantly surprised and proud of what Apple's designers had created. They took all of the weirdness and sort of clunkiness out of the VR category, made the product distinctly Apple. I mean, you can see little features on there that you can find on the Apple Watch, and it's familiar. It looks exactly the way that I hoped that it would. But then they created features with it that are so remarkable, that delight in a way that no other VR and AR goggles or glasses have until now. The fact that the hand gestures, first of all, you don't need a gizmo in your hand. You don't need to hold something in your hand.
Right.
The hand gestures, you don't have to put them in front of you and just do like these weird sort of, Tom Cruise sci-fi.
Minority Report.
Right.
Yep.
It's totally Minority Report. You can just sit there and it'll pick up what the hand gestures are wherever they are. The fact that there's an outward facing screen that makes it appear as if you can see the eyes of the person that's wearing the goggles, to make the experience more social, a bit less claustrophobic and disconnected. We can have a completely separate discussion about how I feel about putting on a face screen and wearing a face screen for hours on end, regardless of the pass through and what that might do to our society. And maybe we can talk about it today. I don't know, but despite my misgivings about the technology and what the unintended consequences of the technology actually scaling, I think that what Apple released was it exceeded my expectations. It was. They kept using the term magical in their presentation.
They do that all the time.
Right.
I don't know if you paid attention.
I do, but I think it rang more true this time than it usually is.
So it's funny, I think I'm less enthusiastic than you are.
Yeah. Okay.
Despite being an Apple fangirl myself. Yeah. I think for me, I'll just rapid fire some pros and cons. I think I'm very disappointed and bummed that this is at the core VR headset that's doing AR.
Yeah.
I get why. I'm an engineer. I understand.
Right.
Like this is from a technical point of view, this thing is incredible. And that I expect nothing else from Apple in that regard. In that sense, they nailed it. From a design perspective, it's the best you can do in this form factor that we've seen to date. Awesome for that. But I know that where they're going is glasses. Where they're going is this that I'm holding in my hands for the Patreons right now, I'm taking my glasses off, but you put it on and all that stuff we saw at the keynote happens, except the VR part. You know what I'm saying? Like the full immersion might happen if you put like a little accessory that covers, like slips on magnetically and covers the sides of your eyes. When you're on an airplane, you can enjoy it. That is where we're going. What we need to go through this to get there. And that's why I'm not super excited, because I hate VR headsets.
Yeah.
So, we can have an entire side podcast about that, but that's to me the core issue here. This thing is going to look dorky on anyone. And in that sense, it's so on Apple. I was talking with Anshel on Twitter about this. Basically, with the iPhone, there was already smartphones out there. People were using them already. Apple just took it and basically made it right. They basically, and there were app stores already. Symbian had an app store by the time the iPhone shipped. Yeah. Like, the point is nobody was doing it right. They did it right, and they showed the rest, and the rest of the world is doing it better now. Apple Watch is a wearable like the headset, and I was a little bit more cautious on that one, having worked for Pebble and stuff, knowing the challenges. And I was like, And if you look, it was, I think the reason the Apple Watch was successful is because it's a familiar product. Everybody's worn a watch. Everybody knows what a watch like. Plus, you can really customize it with all the bands and the colors, much more so than an iPhone. Of course, you can customize your iPhone with a case, but it stays in your pocket. It's not visible as a status symbol.
Right.
And so this is a wearable, but it doesn't match what Apple does. It doesn't make you look good. It doesn't make you look sexy, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of a big deal. To me, that's the one thing that stands out the most. And that's why I'm disappointed in that sense, because I want glasses, but I also know that's not possible yet. And we need to get the entire ecosystem up to spec. And of course, all the technology in the background, better silicon. Like, if you look at some of the things they've added to this, like, you mentioned it, like the fake see-through, and the fact that when a person approaches, you can kind of see them coming, and it does this nice rendering of them. Like the fact that it has, super high resolution screens, the fact that it has this, the dial, which they have on the AirPod Maxes and on the watch as well. It's brilliant. The fact that you can adjust how much reality and not you want. These are things that are going to basically be there forever, in my opinion. Like they are like kind of staples of what Apple does right. But at the same time, I feel like this is the first product that Apple's done that is really much more beta alpha than anything else they've done before, because they have to. It's way better than the competition, but they can't get to where they want without going through the dorky stage and through the pricey stage and through the, let's see if we can get the developers on board stage. And my conversation with Angela was basically that I said, look, 4 generations, right? Like the iPhone 4, the 4th iPhone, nailed it. That was the first one that had all the right elements. Gorgeous Braun-inspired design, none of this plasticky, blobby shape. It had the Retina display. It had HD video. It had a front camera. It had copy-paste. It had 4G LTE. It had everything, and we were ready. It was it. From there on, it's basically being iterative, right? But if you look at this or the Apple Watch took 2-3 generations? I think it was Gen 3 that really was properly baked, and they finally found their stride with all the health and fitness stuff. I think this is a 4 or 5 year thing.
Yeah.
I think by 2030, we will have something resembling bulky glasses that are no longer covering your body and feeling uncomfortable, because there's no doubt this thing, even for the 2-hour battery life it offers, there's no doubt this thing's going to be sweaty, heavy, unpleasant to wear. And that's the thing that really strikes me, is that I see where you're coming from. Like, this is amazing and magical and wow, best VR headset ever. But I don't want VR. I want AR. And I think that's what Apple wants too. This is a stepping stone in the direction.
Yeah, no, I agree. But it's funny. I was at a conference a few months ago, 3G Americas, 5G Americas, and it's I asked all of the carriers if they were making preparations for the era of AR glasses. just theoretically, right? Because Apple hadn't released anything yet. I'm like, okay, so if this goes to AR and it goes to kind of, mobile tethered sort of, glasses, whether there's a cable attached to the phone, or if it's some kind of Bluetooth connection with the phone and it taps into 5G, or 10 years from now 6G networks. What are you guys building in terms of infrastructure? How are you thinking about this? And all the answers I had were basically, yeah, no, we're not really, yeah, we're not talking about it yet. It's like there's no plan to create an infrastructure that would be able to address the demands of mass adoption of AR glasses that people would wear kind of ubiquitously, right? Where they go into the coffee shop and things pop up in augmented reality, where they can shop that way, get their news that way, essentially where they wear a screen on their faces doing everyday things outside of a Wi-Fi network. And that to me was pretty telling, because that suggested to me that there's nothing in the works in the next 5 years for any OEM, for any tech company like Apple or Google or Meta, anyone, to release a true mobile first AR product, or an AR product that would connect to a 5G network, or in the future to a 6G network. And one of the things that was kind of absent from Apple's presentation was the connectivity piece of the Vision Pro, what it connects to. All I could see though was that all of the use cases were indoors. It was the couch, the office, right?
Yeah.
The living room, the kitchen. It wasn't walking down the street. It wasn't sitting in the park. Even on airplanes, I'm assuming either it's Wi-Fi or it has its own, built-in memory. You can watch movies.
Planes have Wi-Fi, and if you're somewhere where you don't have Wi-Fi, I guess you can tether your iPhone, because you're going to have an iPhone if you have one of those.
Potentially,
for sure.
Yeah. And it's not a scale play, right? I mean, this isn't going to be a mass adoption product. Obviously, it's you're going to get the very rabid early adopters with with thick, heavy, healthy bank accounts who can fork out $3,500
and the pros, right? I think there's
Yeah.
a case to be made for business use on this product, and there's a case to be made for the developer community to see where they can take it, right?
Yeah.
Because I think so far, with Meta and Vive, we haven't really been able to do some things that this is allowing, right? They are really, truly, I think, next gen. And this is where I think I'm more excited. As an ex-developer making video games for years, this is where Apple's going with this. They're like, we have this problem where we can't make this a super sexy Apple product in the sense of what people are expecting. There's that problem that we need to create an ecosystem for it. Let's make a VR headset. That way we can get away with being just indoors and Wi-Fi only. And then we'll add the gizmo. I mean, they can add 5G tomorrow to this thing, right? Like it's not a big deal, right? And so especially at that price point, they could keep it the same price even. So I think that you're right. I think that we are seeing a glimpse of what could be. And I think it's going to wake up the competition, hopefully, and start mobilizing. And it's true and sad in a way that they were waiting to see what Apple was going to do, because that, like, wow, like really, guys. But yeah, anyway, like there are so many things we could go on about. I want to just mention a few. The FaceTime that uses a rendered version of you, which kind of is uncanny valley and creepy. But look, 100%. Just give it time. Give it time. Yeah. Like the reality is this is, in the same way as, on Star Trek, you have transporters that dematerialize you and rematerialize you somewhere else. There's no doubt that the future of 3D video conferencing is not a camera capturing you in real time from multiple angles. It's a rendered as realistic as you version, right? There's no other way to do this. The question is, can we do it right?
Troubling. Like all of it is just.
But look, Google's doing the same thing with what's it called, Project whatever it is, Starlight, Starground, Star.
Sure,
you know the one I'm talking about.
But it's kind of like I have like this line that I draw when I look at tech. Does this solve a problem, right? Or is this a solution in search of a problem? I think that it's. We run the risk with that many screens already between us, right? What was the line in that one movie? Like, there's glass between us. We already sort of feel more and more disconnected because of glass, because of filters, because of technology, all of these things that just keep adding up between us. If on top of that, when we do finally interact with someone and we're interacting with a digital rendering of them, it's not even the real person anymore. I think that there's a real risk that we lose
What's
something.
real? Is a camera real? Is a photo real? Is video real?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, again,
No.
filters, glass, but
No, different lenses, different filters, different processing gives you different skin color, gives you different, like right now, you're not looking as good as the last time I saw you in Austin.
No, my lighting is terrible in here. That's true.
But that's not what I meant. I don't think it's a technical problem. I think it's purely a media problem.
Yeah.
Like the medium we're using right now is not giving me the same fidelity. I think this can be overcome. I think this is the only way, like realistically, engineering wise, to go forward.
Yeah.
Short of like teleportation. and I think it's going to solve some problem. I agree though, that all of this is adding glass, right? Between us is adding, and that's been a problem for a while and it's not going to get better. But other technologies in there that blew my mind, of course, is, the dial, the display quality, the fact that it can track your eyes better than anything else we've ever done. The fact that you can do the gestures down here, below, anywhere. These are things that I think the competition will eventually match, but it's going to be, again, they're 2 years behind now. Suddenly they're 2 years behind. Right. And that's kind of the takeaway here is this is not a product for you, the audience. You can buy one, but I don't actually suggest you don't. I'm not going to spend money on it. I'm going to try it out and be blown away and want it hard, but it's not for us. This is a 5 years from now, come back and check in to see what's going on. If we haven't all died in a firestorm of ash from climate change before that. Hat tip to our friends in New York who are suffering right now.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Although I have misty skies here too, and I'm in South Carolina, so it's all the way down here, but to a much lesser extent, obviously. No, one thing, it's a design philosophy being articulated through this first generation product. The one thing I'm curious about though is Apple did sort of break its own rule by having a separate battery pack with a cable, right? And again, like we keep having this discussion about like engineering and what is the most expedient or elegant way to solve an engineering problem. And they had a choice, right? Either put the battery pack on the back and make it bulkier and heavier, but well balanced with no cable, or just have an elegant looking interface or connection with a cable and a battery pack that's easy to swap out. Obviously, they went with the latter. There was no good option. There was no perfect solution to this. I think one of the things that may be behind this decision is, one, it's easier, but also if and when Apple manages to do this without a cable, it'll be a big deal. And I think that it'll feel like the design is maturing and being propelled forward, and it's now truly an Apple design. So in a way, they're sort of like tying their own hand behind their back in order to be able to push their momentum a little bit faster when they untie it, when they're ready to.
Yeah, no, I feel like this is totally a Gen 2 thing. Gen 2 will have no external battery pack and will be much lighter overall. But technologically, use case wise, it's going to be the same. Again, the same. They didn't have copy paste. They didn't have the App Store. They didn't have, video recording on the original iPhone. Like what surprised me the most about the pack was that it wasn't a standard USB Type-C connector. Yeah. It's tethered permanently. I mean, you can kind of see there's a cutout, so you can probably take it apart to replace the cable. But why? Why not let me carry my, 100,000 milliamp hour battery pack in my back pocket, connect the thing to it, and power that if I need to?
Because it'll get disconnected, right? Because it probably dangles.
I have to have the Apple one, and the Apple one is just weird. It's
but
this
Apple,
is so Apple because now they have an entire new ecosystem of another type of magnetic connector that they can market to us. Look, we need to move on to the other stuff briefly, but I kind of think this is very exciting and very much let's see what happens. It's worth getting excited about. I'm just disappointed it's VR. But I know why. Like I didn't think, like when I heard the ski ball, I was like, yeah, that's what they're going to have to do. But damn, Apple, I really thought you'd come out of the box. Like I kind of thought that they could have done, if they can, if they can miniaturize the displays and the eye tracking and the cameras for the hand tracking more, that's really the challenge here.
Yeah.
Because they don't really need the VR part. Like they can do without that part. And then, actually have, but the problem is you can't pack all the stuff that they pack. And then of course you can remove the stupid, fake see-through thing, right?
Right. I think, it's in the end, maybe there'll be a bifurcation, right? Sort of like with laptops and iPads, where they eventually reconverge, but there might still be sort of like a VR AR, like the Pro product, which is I think why they called it Pro anyway. And then when they switch and veer off to AR as well, they can still have both tracks with essentially the same OS, and have different application, different use cases based on who you are, what your budget is, what you need to do. So it's fine. I mean, it's honestly it's great. It's a reset for the entire category. It's they pointed to the bleachers. Now it's everybody's game. Either follow us, Apple, or do your own thing, which might be,
Absolutely.
Microsoft and Meta might have to decide, what, we're going to borrow a few of these features, but we have to go in a different direction.
Yeah. And I want to acknowledge something you said. Like, I think Apple played us really well too. Like for a second there in the keynote, I thought they were done before they had, I was like, it sounds like they're wrapping up, until he said one more thing. I was like, okay, you're done. Wow. You're not doing the headset today. And then it was like, oh yes, you're doing the headset. Right. That was a nice little troll on their part there. But
we
look,
deserved it.
Let's talk Macs, because I'm a Mac person, and I don't want to go over all the software things because there's so much great software. The reality is we'll be able to focus on this new software for the iPhone, the watch, the AirPods, all that stuff when it actually comes out in the fall alongside the new iPhones. What's got me most excited here is that MacBook Air 15. I'm a MacBook Air user. I've got a 13 here, M2, and I don't need the 15, so I'm not going to go out and buy it. But I know many people who are dying to get themselves not a Pro, but an Air 15, and they nailed it, and at the same time gave us a cheaper price on the 13, which I think was welcome and necessary. So
I'm one of those people. So my take is I love the 15-inch laptop. That's my jam. I know it's a little bit big, it's a little bit bulky, whatever, but I like something. I always on the road. I need something portable. I need something with a big screen. I don't like small keyboards and small screens. So I've been waiting for this. And when I saw it, I was excited. It's one of the things about this year that made me want to jump back into the Apple ecosystem. Finally, a MacBook Air that I'm excited about. That can probably serve all of my needs. So this year might be the last year that I'm on PC, that I'm using a Surface right now, and I'm fairly happy with it. But it's going to be a whole different ball game with this 15-inch MacBook Air. Yeah, I'm super excited about that. It was kind of like the missing link in their lineup. Yeah.
I feel it's taken a while for them to come out with it. It's almost a year since the 13-inch MacBook Air M2 came out. And honestly, a lot of people are going to be perfectly well served with the M1 13-inch right now if you're shopping for a Mac and you don't need the bigger screen size. Yeah. But being a Mac aficionado, the M2 adds a better camera, and I like the design. It's super thin, super light, and a slightly brighter screen, slightly higher res, etc. So the 15-inch just cranks all that up one notch. There's nothing different really in terms of performance, other than you get the 10-core GPU by default, whatever. The point is, you get more battery and you get a bigger screen, and in a 11.5 millimeter form factor. Holy freaking wow.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I use it every day. I know how thin it is, but I can't wrap my head. It's going to look thinner in a 15-inch form factor because, proportions. I think it's brilliant. I cannot wait to see it. I'm not going to get one for myself, but I know that Theo, my spouse and producer, once they want to upgrade, they're going to go to that for sure, because they want a bigger screen badly. What are the other things that stood out for you from the studio and the Mac Pro announcements? The M2 Max has been with us for a while now, but the M2 Ultra is a beast. And this is another, to your point about silicon, right? Apple silicon scales from freaking watch right now all the way to probably server grade performance, right?
Yeah. I think what what struck me the most, first of all, was there was this tiny little mention at one point where they said, and this completes our, transition or whatever to Apple Silicon, at least within the Macs. And I thought that was kind of clever, and it was super subtle, but also sort of like, yes, we did it. F you to all the non-believers. But the other thing was the emphasis on not just the usual, hey, this is the fastest and most powerful Mac we've ever, introduced. It wasn't also just, this is, 50% better than the previous generation. It was the emphasis on comparing these new M2 Macs to the Intel Macs. And it was sort of like, it's 6x performance increase compared to an Intel based Mac. And
Pro. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I thought I thought that was very deliberate, and also just kind of marked the point that yes, this is a completely new era. We're not even in the same ballpark. This isn't incremental improvements like what you're used to seeing. This is a completely different category of product, and the users will feel that as they use them. So that's the thing that struck me the most. The rest of it, I expect them to be better. I expect them to be more power efficient, which is really important, especially in the enterprise these days. I expect them to be faster, to be able to handle video and do all the things that professional level Apple products can do. But that jump from the Intel performance to the Apple Silicon performance was the thing that stood out to me the most. Aside from, the partnerships. Yeah. And
I mean, I was just surprised how much they announced at this WWDC in general. Like the headset was a whole thing, but then they did 3 Macs. That's unheard of usually, even in a regular keynote. And I know a lot of them were iterative, right? Like the Mac Studio, we know what it looks like. It's just a new chip. Great. Yeah. But the Mac Pro also, same box, same everything. But what blows my mind, a lot of people aren't talking about, it has expansion slots. It's compatible basically with an ecosystem of cards. Of course, you'll need drivers because this is Apple Silicon, but it tells you how well they can scale this architecture. Holy crap. And, when I got my MacBook Air M1, I came from that janky 12-inch MacBook and, of course, an iMac that I was using. So I had a high-end Intel iMac, not the iMac Pro, but the regular iMac, Core i5, whatever. I didn't have the i7. And then I had, that 12-inch MacBook that was super light and portable that I only used when I traveled. And, both of them were a little sluggish. I went to the M1 MacBook Air and they just ran circles around both my existing Macs, even though at the time, my iMac was 3 years old. It wasn't very old. And it's interesting. Notice they've transitioned the iMac 24-inch to Apple Silicon, but we haven't seen an iMac 27-inch. And I don't think that's ever coming back now that we have Studio Display, which is a real bummer for me because that was a form factor I really enjoyed, the larger iMac. And I don't think that's coming back. But
yeah, I don't know.
I think that what people are going to feel if they're professionals using a Mac Pro today that's Intel based and going to switch to this Apple Silicon is going to be the same experience I had when I went M1, which was like, oh my God. And then the battery life, in this case, their power consumption on their, on their business, expenses is going to be a huge deal.
I keep talking to IT folks who talk to me about the total cost of ownership, right? TCO of using Mac and essentially switching to Mac. And I think it's been one of the drivers of this transition in the enterprise, which I didn't expect ever would happen 10 years ago, where you're seeing a lot more Macs in the enterprise. The market share or the desk share of Macs to x86 laptops in the enterprise is increasing steadily. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's not just the performance, it's also the fact that performance per watt with those laptops is also improving.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. I still use my iMac from time to time when I'm in San Francisco, so it's down there. It's convenient. It's got the big screen. I like that. It does the job, but for more intensive things, I use my MacBook Air now for video editing, for example. But when I'm here in Vancouver, I only have my MacBook Air. I had a Mac Mini, but it's an old one and it's just slow. And I was going to replace it with a Mac Mini M2, but then I was like, you know what? Forget it. I've got everything on one computer. So I use this thing here and it's amazing because I can go sometimes 2 days without charging. Like I can go, because I take breaks and the computer goes to sleep and I'm not plugged in. And this Yoga Book 9i that I have barely lasts me a day. I mean, it's driving two displays because I'm using it in that mode. So granted, but they're OLED, not IPS. So I'm kind of surprised that like it's interesting going back now to Intel how much of a difference that actually really is. Like how much more power efficient my M2 Mac is at just normal daily stuff. Like sure, if I start firing up the cores and editing video, I see a decrease too, but it's still not even proportional to what I see on Intel. And that's why I really want, if you're listening, Qualcomm and Microsoft, we need you to at least match M1 for Windows, because I'm not against Windows. I don't have any issues with it. I just want the same delightful experience I get in my Mac day after day after day. And it's kind of crazy that I only look at, every now and then I look at my battery, I'm like, oh, I'm at 12%, let's plug in. And that, that's like 2 or 3 days have gone by or something. Yeah. I'm exaggerating, but sometimes if I don't work too hard, it's 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. They're working on it. They'll get there eventually. Hopefully not.
I hope so.
Not too long.
I hope that Windows on ARM becomes more of a priority for everyone. And I kind of want MediaTek to jump in there too, Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be nice they could.
So let's talk about some news real quick. There's a bunch of stuff because I didn't do news at all last week. Me and Michael were so excited about the Razer and the Yoga Book. That's all we talked about. So first of all, these are kind of like, some of these are PSA. PSA number 1, Samsung Galaxy Unpacked. We expect it to be July 26th. That's from last week's news, but it's now confirmed to be in Seoul, South Korea, which means I won't go unless they fly me, but they never do. So I don't know, I'm not going to go. But so some of you are going to go. And for those of you who do, awesome. What's your take on them doing it in Seoul? That's kind of unusual. They've done everything: London, Paris, New York, San Francisco, Las Vegas, or Barcelona, but they've never done Seoul, have they?
Maybe, well, first of all, why not? Right? I mean, if they've already gone everywhere else, it's sort of like, this is the circuit. This year we're doing
why
this.
Not Tokyo or Hong Kong? Or, well, Hong Kong has got its own problems. But how about Taipei,
Right.
Like, I'm just saying it's kind of like, do you think there's some kind of intent here saying, let's bring it home?
Oh, wow. Okay. So yes, it seems like it would be. I think that anytime you do that, it's probably safe to say that that's part of the intent. Now, I'm not going to project or assign any intent to their decisions. I have no idea. I have no inside knowledge. But I think, especially if you haven't had that kind of event in your hometown, in your home country for a while, and you want to bring back attention to, hey, this is a matter of national pride. This is part of our culture. This is like, let's celebrate this at home with the home team. I don't think that's that unusual. I could see, being French, if France had a tech company as successful as Samsung, I could 100% see at one point every 10 years or every time that we come to a new generation or a big announcement, something that's going to kind of reset the trajectory of the company. I could see doing that in Paris as opposed to doing it in New York or doing it in San Francisco or Tokyo or somewhere else. So there's that. I think there are also some geopolitical issues in Asia that may make Samsung decide, hey, let's do something that casts a brighter light on the potential and the power and the strength and importance of Korea, as opposed to, hey, we're just a company that's out there serving the world. So I'm sure that that's part of the reason. That's part of the decision to do it. And also maybe just, it might be a big economic opportunity for the country as a whole and for the city to have a big event there. So so I think there are a lot of factors there that play into it.
I feel the same as you do. I think this is fair. Okay, a couple of news items I'm going to strike out in one shot here.
All right.
2 phones that are available in China are now available globally. The Xiaomi 13 Ultra, the camera phone to end all camera phones. And another camera-centric phone that's really awesome, the Realme 11 Pro Plus. I have a review unit of the Pro Plus. I just got it, so give me a few podcasts before I can tell you how awesome it is. We talked about it 2 weeks ago a little bit with Benson. It wasn't on the show, but Benson wrote about it, got a hands-on early on. I was invited to go to New York to get a hands-on early on, but it was a conflict for me, so I couldn't make it. A $450, $500 phone with incredibly good imaging is the Realme 11 Pro Plus, and that's why it's excited. It's now a global device. It's available in India and other markets. And the Xiaomi, of course, is, the best camera phone, at least on paper. And the performance has been impressing us. I don't have a device yet, but now that it's global, maybe they'll send me one. A lot of my colleagues have the Chinese model. But this is just a kind of heads up on those of you. Quickly, Olivier, what's your take on, these kind of imaging-centric smartphones that really, other than Samsung maybe with the S23 Ultra, right, we're not really seeing in the West at all?
I love them, and I'm a big fan of competition. So any phones that implement those types of features that can really kind of offer something different, something better, are always, I think, good for the market, right? They push Samsung, they push Apple to be better even. So I want to see more competition. I want to see these Chinese players in the U.S. market. I think that the fear and the backlash against the Chinese Communist Party and just China in general may be a little bit overblown when it comes to this. There are legitimate reasons to block and be cautious with some Chinese-made technology. I think that in these instances, we don't need to be that concerned about it. I think that we need to have a line between the things that are safe to have in the U.S. market and technologies that it may not be as safe to have in the U.S. market. And I wish that we wouldn't conflate one with the other as much as we do.
And I also feel like I can understand, wanting to ban even consumer products because they might be used in business and in, government. But I think you could put restrictions on that and still let us consumers take the risk. Like if we want,
correct,
when we install TikTok, we take a risk, guys. That's the reality, right? And anybody can do that on any device. And I'm not trying to be a jerk here. This is just a reality. It's fact. But who knows what's going on? It's the same. Sometimes I install, every time I install a benchmark from China on my phone, I need to try it because I need to test those benchmarks. But okay,
yeah, I think some guardrails are fine and letting people. But I think we should. I don't know why we're so cautious with the smartphones, especially those. If they work well enough in Europe, and we have agencies here and capabilities. We can do things, right?
We can test it, right? Exactly.
Yeah, a broad ban like this is kind of silly.
But speaking of a Chinese company, in this case, the same parent company as Realme, BBK Group, we've got a new OnePlus that's just announced. I have it in my hand, but I'm not allowed to show it to you. But you've seen the photos. It's essentially a remake of the OnePlus Nord CE3 Lite in Europe, and it's sold as a OnePlus Nord N30 in the US. Price point's very aggressive. It's pretty good for this market. It's got some really impressive features, especially the 108 megapixel camera, which is actually right out of the Realme 10 Pro Plus, the previous Realme imaging mid-range flagship. So cool phone. You've seen photos of it on the internet. Stay tuned for a review soon, folks. And good to see another Nord series from OnePlus come to the US, because this is, competes right up there with the Moto G and other, phones that we just don't get from abroad, like these Realmes and Xiaomis and Pocos and Redmis. So I'm excited to see OnePlus at least trying.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of related to that, I'm going to shuffle the order around. There is a Moto G Stylus 5G that came out for 2023. Very iterative, a little more affordable at $400 this year. It's essentially the same as the G Stylus 4G, but with a Snapdragon 6 Gen 1, which is a chip we haven't seen often on phones yet. And, the rest of it is very Moto G, which is unfortunately very meh. The problem is that our budget mid-range market in the US doesn't have competition. So, OnePlus is probably the only one pushing prices down, but Moto doesn't care. And they don't have to because they have the prepaid carriers on their pocket for these. So, and, the specs are kind of meh for the money, but at the same time, it exists. And if you're looking for an affordable phone with a stylus, this might be something, worth considering. So there you go.
Cool.
What do you think of Moto's G strategy? Do you like? I feel like they
I
used to
don't.
be really. You don't.
I don't. I'm sorry to be
Like
that
you
way.
don't because you don't follow, or you don't because you just feel like they're dropping the ball.
I feel like they're dropping the ball a little bit, but
I
I mean,
agree.
they know their market better than I do. But sometimes I wonder. It's kind of like, fine, they're making money, but what's the point? Like, where's this going? You know,
Yeah.
especially if we start seeing a lot more competition come from other Chinese OEMs make their way through. It's sort of like you do something, like set yourselves apart in some way. I feel.
Yeah, and that's what I feel like. I think this is why I like, I liked LG back in the day in that
Yeah.
price point, and I like OnePlus being in this price point because they're, even though they're not quite as affordable as Realme and Redmi and Poco out there in the other parts of the world, they are pushing the prices down. They're dragging Moto into a more realistic price point because the Moto Gs used to be awesome when they first
Mhm.
came out, especially like 2 or 3 years in, where they're metal and glass and they were affordable, and I checked every box, and I remember recommending them to people left, right, and center because back then, especially, you needed CDMA support on Verizon, all that stuff. And then now they're just kind of cruising along with these really plasticky, 1080p IPS screens that are kind of meh, and 50
Yep.
megapixel cameras that are kind of meh. And you're like, where is the excitement, Moto? Yet at the high end, they're doing so great again with the
Yep.
Moto Edge Plus and the Razr. So, I don't know.
Yeah, they're phoning it in. That's my dad joke for the day.
That's a good one. I like it. Honor 90 series in China. I don't have much to say about this except that stay tuned because I hear that this might be coming as a global phone like the Honor 70 did last year. And I got a review unit of the 70. It was a decent phone for the money. The big news here has a 200 megapixel Samsung ISOCELL HP3 sensor, which is a pretty nice camera sensor. And who knows how well that's going to pan out. They have a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1. So, AMOLED display. This is pretty high end. So I think this is kind of premium mid-range, almost flagship because they have the Magic 5 as the flagship, Magic 5 Pro, right? So stay tuned for that. I don't really need to tell you much more because it's more like if you are an Honor fan and you are abroad and you're not in China, expect this to land probably in Europe or something. Maybe in time for IFA or whatever, Okay, MetaQuest 3. They launched that last week or the week before, and it's like now there's Apple Vision Pro. So where do you think Meta's at? $500 is a good price point, right? But
it is a good price point. That's the big thing. I honestly look. I don't think it makes a difference this year. Meta is going to have to rethink, I think, its entire business plan. I think they have a good base. They have a really good product, but essentially you have two visions of where this is going. I think Apple's vision is going to win out. Note that Apple embraced the term spatial computing and created a very specific experience or idea of what the experience should be, where Meta has been focusing on this metaverse, right? Whatever the metaverse is. I think the metaverse is dead in terms of in terms of a marketing ploy. I don't think it's going anywhere. Not that it ever was. I think Mark Zuckerberg, as smart as he may be, I think missed the point of the entire thing, and is just like hasn't had a compelling vision for it anyway. So I think Meta is on the verge of having to reinvent itself or figure out what it wants to be in 5 years and 10 years. And so its product timeline its product pipeline for the next 12 to 18 months is what it is, right? I wouldn't expect anything like major from them, but it's good that they have a price point that's much lower than Apple's. I think that might help them. I don't think that they want to be the bargain player or like, the nice, good,
the
friendly
Android
price point.
of the VR world.
I don't think that's really where they want to be. They want to play in premium, and so now they're going to have to do something to match Apple to be able to get there. So they've been kind of like put in a corner by Apple, which is a nice. One of the things that Apple does really well in terms of creating, like, not just positioning themselves in a market, but forcing everybody into whatever corner they want to put them in. But one thing that I will say, though, is I've been looking at some reports by some analyst firms, not mine, that recently that predicted that following Apple's announcement of their product, whatever the product would be called. So these have been kind of trickling out in the last few weeks. They were expecting a 2x and 3x increase in shipments of VR products, goggles, essentially, in the next couple of years. Like literally by 2026, it was supposed to be 3 times more than what they're shipping now. I think that's incorrect. I think it feels more like a sales pitch from the hardware vendors saying, hey, look, the metaverse is happening, VR is happening. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we're still going to see that slump for the next 2 years. So it doesn't really matter what Meta releases this year and next year, I don't think. I think what happens, what I'm looking at is what Meta is going to release in 2025. Right? Which is to echo your point earlier that it's going to take 2 years for everybody to catch up. And so, yeah, I don't really care. I didn't care about Meta. Like it's going to be better. Every iteration is going to be better than the year before. But I think they're going to have to fundamentally do something very different in order to be able to appeal to an audience that now looks at Apple's products as the standard for the types of experience and features that they expect on these products. Or if they want to be the bargain VR vendor, which they don't, they can keep doing what they're doing now, I guess. I know it sounds harsh, although I would say that the form factor being thinner is nice. It's a nice touch.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's definitely a good step forward in their universe, but it's just completely off, now after all of this stuff. Sony Project Q, that's not too new, but it's a couple of weeks old now. It's a game streaming handheld that's coming later this year. What are your thoughts on that real quick?
I don't focus on the gaming world that much, so I actually don't have an opinion on this.
Neither do I really, other than it's interesting that it's a streamer. So it's not, it's just simply a display that can stream your games from your PlayStation. I think this is very Sony, and as such, it's
it is
both flawed and kind of exciting. And good luck with that, I guess. I'm not against it. I disclaimer, I did used to work for Sony Computer Entertainment of America at some point. So it totally fits in with their way of doing things. This was a decade ago. So, of course, things have changed over there. Nothing Phone 2 specs have leaked in more detail. I just want to bring that up. There's going to be a link in the show notes to the GSM Arena story, folks. This is a highly anticipated phone for everyone, especially here in North America, since it's coming to the US. And here's what we know. Of course, 8 Plus Gen 1, we knew that already. That's been here all this time. Nothing too new on that one front. But at the same time, we have a size on the display, 6.55 inches, so actually a little smaller. And it does have, 50 megapixel camera as OS. It sounds like it's basically an evolution of the Nothing Phone 1, but with a slightly better processor. And the rumors on the battery that was going to be 4,700 milliamp hours seem to have changed to 5,000. So that's actually an improvement, because I used the Nothing Phone 1 and I loved it. I personally had no issues with the lesser processor, but I'm happy that it gains a more flagship-like one, because for people who like gaming or something. But the battery was always a little small, and I think they had to compromise because of all the gimmicks. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think Glyph is awesome, but I think I call it gimmicks because I never really cared about the LEDs in the back. I just thought the phone looked cool, Right. What's your take on Nothing and what they're doing?
Well, no, it seems like they're fine-tuning. Right, they're kind of playing with the screen size. I think the battery was definitely a result of feedback from the market, right? And I agree that was one of the weaknesses that they needed to address, and I think they did. It's hard to find your niche in a market that's already kind of so saturated. And beyond the price points, which is kind of like the categories that a lot of these phones kind of gravitate towards, it's either you win on camera, you win on battery life, you win on the ability to game. You have to win on something. And that can be a hard game if you're not a Samsung or an Apple or an Oppo or OnePlus. Yeah.
For sure. But I feel like, Nothing has an advantage in CalPay and the whole marketing machine. But more importantly, all the relationship he built when he was at OnePlus with all the suppliers and manufacturers and partners. And, their edge here is that they're making a very well-rounded product that doesn't have anything superfluous other than the glyph, but that's because that's their gimmick and that's how they differentiate to some extent. And I like that about them. I feel like they're making really nice products because of it. And their value proposition is there because the pricing is really aggressive, but also you can tell that they've developed a relationship. Like they're a mature company. Like I wouldn't be surprised if BBK comes back and swoops nothing back in at some point. And maybe that's part of the whole strategy, like let's let you do your own thing for a little while, see how well you do, and we'll have another brand under our umbrella, right? Because I know Carl was probably a little frustrated when he couldn't really take the Nord brand where he wanted to, and this is his way of doing that. But I'm sure he's still on super good terms with Pete Lau, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of like a year or 2 or 5 from now, kind of like reacquisition or something. But maybe I'm wrong. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we'll see. We will see. Like, I mean, it'd be an interesting, it doesn't happen very often. So it'd be cool, but I could see how that could happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Never know. All right. Last couple of items are Google related. There are rumors, of course, around the Pixel Watch 2, but this one's interesting. I don't generally like rumors that much, especially on a product like that. I am wearing a Pixel Watch though, and I like it a lot. But, Snapdragon W5, in considering how Google's been so Samsung-y in all their partnerships of everything hardware related lately, do you see any truth to that rumor? And if so, what does that tell you?
I mean, let me answer by just saying this. I'm still really disappointed in Android watches.
Yes.
I don't know what the problem is. It's ridiculous. And nothing. I'm not trying to say anything bad about Apple. Like I'm happy for Apple's success, but come on, it shouldn't be that difficult to come out with a product that rivals the Apple Watch on the Android side. And whether it's Samsung or Google, and it should be easier for them because they're closer to the ecosystem. I don't understand what the problem is. Are they just not putting enough money behind it? Do they not care? Is it sort of like, yeah, we'll throw a little bit of money, a little bit of talent at it, but it's not a priority? Like at this point, we should have amazing Android watches, and we're still only just now starting to scratch the surface of what they could be.
It's true. It's true. The Pixel Watch, though, I think is the closest we've seen to Apple Watch so far, other than battery life and the fact there's only one size and I need 2 sizes.
Right.
This is looking ridiculously small on my wrist. But look, I think Samsung's also done a good job, but you're right. We're not quite there yet. I'm hoping that the Pixel Watch 2 gets the Snapdragon chip because I think it's going to be a better processor than anything Exynos and Samsung can bring to the table. And 100%. I hope it's available in 2 sizes and battery life is better because if they can do all that, even with the existing software, it's a pretty decent watch if you're not in the Apple ecosystem.
I completely agree. The issue with me isn't so much the hardware. It's not the chips.
It's the ecosystem.
It's the ecosystem. That's been the problem because Snapdragon.
Android is so fragmented. Look at it. Like that's the nature of Android. Like Samsung's got their own little parallel crappy version of the ecosystem. And in a way, Pixel is its own, googly Android ecosystem that is also not quite, I like it better because it's got some things in it that are more my vibe. But it's still not even rivaling what Apple's doing, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it, right?
And it's nice to have your own stack, but yeah, but to answer your question, yes, if I were to build my own Android watch, and I were to pick my components, 100%, I would go with Snapdragon every single time. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. And I've been very vocal about the fact that I feel that Pixel phones should be running Snapdragon or MediaTek chips because
I wish they were.
Tensor is, I don't see what the point is. It doesn't bring anything to the table you can't do with these other chips at this point. And if they really needed some kind of very custom silicon to do something very specific we're not aware of, why not do what Oppo did with Mary Silicon X, which is an MPU for image processing? Just add that to your phone, fire it up when you need to. It will sure do a little bit of a ding on battery life, but it won't be so bad. And at least you got a core SoC that's solid and has good radios and has good efficiency, whether you go with MediaTek or Qualcomm. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And that brings us to this last news item, which is supposedly that Google had a second Pixel folding phone in the works that they canceled. We don't know if it was a flip type or fold type, but what does it tell you?
Well, for one, the mobile market, especially on the handset side, isn't doing super well this year. So sacrifices must be made to the mobile volcano gods. And maybe it just wasn't the right time. Maybe there wasn't that much of a demand. It's possible that it was kind of like we can support one. We don't need two in the market right now. It's just gonna,
Right.
it's too much of a cost, and there's the ROI just isn't there. Or maybe the on ramp to really scale that new product just wasn't going to happen fast enough. So it might be that, it's completely canceled. It might be like, hey, let's hold off, do something else with it, try again when the market picks up again. Or maybe it was just, they did some market testing and they realized that nobody really wanted it. It might have been a great project internally, but,
I think it's also possible that it's, related to like it took 6 years for the Pixel Watch to become a thing. And like they were just iterating until they got it right, or at least in their mind they got it right. And maybe they were looking to make a cheaper folding phone. Maybe it was a flip phone.
Yeah.
And I think flip is actually probably the better option to pick today if you're going to do a folding phone. But if you can't reach volume and price point, it's really hard to be competitive on flip, especially with Razer now and the cheaper Razer that's coming. And who knows what Samsung's going to do with Z Flip 5, but at least on the the tablet part, like I think that is where I understand why they did that one, because there's still, you can be expensive because it's a premium product and all that. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out.
For me, the issue's always been from a marketing perspective. When you call them a folding phone, it's you're essentially you're describing the phone as becoming smaller.
Right.
And that's not the point. The point is to unfold it and to make it bigger, to take your phone and turn it into a tablet when you need it. And so even though it's a little less elegant to say unfolding phone as opposed to folding phone, it's actually more accurate in terms of description and in terms of articulating the value of what you have. It's a phone that unfolds into a tablet as opposed to a phone that you fold that, oh, by the way, it's a tablet when it's open. I think we've always looked at it as being diminutive as opposed to being additive. And that might be one of the reasons why they haven't done as well in the market as they should have. I don't think it's the price point. I think it's mentally we haven't been primed to think of it as this butterfly that opens into a second device.
You nailed it, because this is, I think, what Moto is doing with the Razer.
Yeah.
The Razer Plus, right? That it is a phone you can perfectly use when it's shut, but it's more compact and more pocketable and more friendly. At the same time, you can make it big and then have a more traditional phone experience.
Correct. Yeah.
Like play a game or watch a video in 16:9 while it's 22:9. So whatever. You get to my point.
Yep.
And I think that I'm hoping once I get my hands on it to actually validate that, yes, you can properly use this thing single-handed or closed for most of the time without feeling like you're missing out.
Exactly.
And I think if they achieve that, then they've really made an already good form factor, in my opinion, the flip folding phone, into an outstanding form factor. So let's see how that pans out.
Yeah. Well, Pixel has other issues. I mean, they need to scale a little bit faster than they are.
Well,
I have a Pixel. I love my Pixel.
Me too.
I want to continue using Pixel. It's a really good phone for the money. The cameras are great, but also like they're not really getting the traction still. And they need to do something.
Oh, but I mean, I'm not sure how serious Google is, though. That's the thing, right? So, anyway.
Let's Google.
We should wrap it up. So, do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, your social media handles, and where they can find your stuff? Obviously, I know you're an analyst, so it might not be publicly visible, but anything you can share with us.
Yeah, sure. So, the best way to find me is probably just to go on Twitter. And look for me. I'm OA Blanchard. So it's my first initial, middle initial. So OA Blanchard, Blanchard. And from there, you'll find me in all the other places. I'm on Instagram too, but it's not tech stuff. It's just basically pictures of my food and my bicycle rides and my dogs.
That's right.
So
and your dogs.
So
yeah, cool.
Very different type of content.
Do you want to let them know where you work?
Yeah, so I'm a principal analyst at Creative Strategies. I'm an industry analyst. I cover AI, automotive, mobile, silicon, and IoT. And I mean, you'll find me cited in various publications, from CNET, whatever. I'm a little bit everywhere. It's just you'll have to,
You have to dig around for it.
You have to dig around, or you'll just bump into me on accident. Yeah.
Exactly. And folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl, TNKGRL, like the comic book character, but drop the vowels. That's pretty much everywhere. Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. So, find me there. Discuss this podcast with me and Olivier on Twitter. And, Instagram is where I put pretty pictures of phones and pretty pictures of cars and food and travel, all taken with phones. That's kind of the shtick. And the podcast itself lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts could be found. So if you want to subscribe, please do that and tell your friends. And if you want to rate or review the show and your app lets you do that, please consider doing that as well. There's a YouTube channel that you should subscribe to as well, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. It's got some hands-on videos, some unboxing videos, and some random stuff, basically, that's tech-related and car-related, since I cover EVs and car tech. So check it out. You know how YouTube works. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the little bell, comment about the videos, but also about the podcast, and let me know what your thoughts are there. So again, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. And if you really want to help out, there's a Patreon, patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. You can get a video version of this podcast ahead of time, a couple of days before it's published for free on the internet as an audio version. So maybe join the Patreon for that. There's also a Discord server you can join and a bunch of other perks. So consider helping me out with Patreon. And if you don't want to help me out with Patreon, because maybe you don't like Patreon, that's cool. There's another option. There's a PayPal link in the show notes. You can click through and make a donation. Buy me a cup of coffee or something. That would be awesome. So yeah, see what you can do to help. I'd appreciate it. And I want to thank our sponsor, Mint Mobile. You know I review a lot of phones, so I'm constantly juggling multiple devices. While that's fun, it also means I'm spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. Thankfully, there's Mint Mobile, and that's who I'm teaming up with for today's podcast. If you want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. You've probably seen the Mint Mobile ads featuring Ryan Reynolds, but let me quickly tell you how fantastic their service is, especially for tech-savvy early adopters like us. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current devices and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM card free of charge. The whole process only takes 15 minutes, and if you get stuck, Mint has a great customer service team to get you through it. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus lightning-fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link, mintmobile.com/mobiletech, to get premium wireless starting at $15 a month. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And I want to thank you, Olivier, for being my guest this week. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
De rien. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll have you on the show at some point in the future again. And folks, we'll have another show next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.